Welcome to State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. The State of Wellbeing is a holistic well-being podcast with the goal of supporting the campus community as we strive to be a growing, high-performing, and healthy university.
Welcome to another episode of the State of Wellbeing podcast. We're really excited to have you joining us today as we continue our conversations over the course of the summer, focusing on employee-centered well-being conversations. I'm really excited today that we get to have a conversation focused on work-work balance. And I'm more excited that our guest today is Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Dean Lynn Sargeant. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm really excited that we get to have this conversation. And so before we get started, maybe give you the floor to just introduce yourself to us. I know I gave the title and that, but just to share a little bit about yourself and your interest in the topic of work-work balance.
Sure. So I am currently serving as the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And I think for me, one of the reasons I'm interested in this topic is it's something I've struggled with. I didn't really have a word for it for a long time. Sure. Everyone talked about work-life balance. And I felt, okay, that's great, but I seem to get my laundry done on time, so that isn't the issue. But didn't necessarily always feel in control of my work life. And read an article, actually, in the Chronicle of Higher Education about a year or so ago about work balance. And I was like, that's the word. That's the word I've been missing. So very excited to be here today to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm very interested to learn more myself about this concept because I think like you, I'm getting my laundry done, but it's the different demands going on here and how I balance those things that I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on it. So why don't we just jump right in and have you tell us all a little bit more about the idea of work-work balance and specifically how it differs from that concept you already mentioned, that work-life balance that we've all heard for a number of years.
Sure. So work-life balance, I think we all understand, is about how do you balance the demands of your job and the demands of the rest of your life. If you have kids, getting them here and there and taking care of them, keeping them fed. If you have a house, keeping it maintained and clean. If you have a spouse or partner, keeping your relationship healthy. All of those things that are outside of work, and you often feel time pressure or sometimes attention pressure to complete at the same time that you're focusing attention on your career and on your work, especially if you're in a demanding position that requires a lot of hours, or if you're perhaps new to a position or early in your career and you're trying to climb that ladder. So there's a lot of competing time. And that's pretty easy to understand. I think we all, struggle with how do you balance those two. But work-work balance is different in that it's about the way we sometimes feel where we have all these competing demands on our time at work, just at work, regardless of what else is happening. And often they seem to be equally important. You've got 10 different things with 10 different deadlines that you're trying to all get done, and whoever assigned them to you or asked you for that information just seems to assume that you can focus on that and get it done. And pretty soon, as those accumulate, I at least begin to feel fractured. I am not able to concentrate. I don't know what to do first. I'm not able to decide what's most important. And so then I'm kind of in this death spiral, chasing my tail, trying to get it all done, putting in more hours, getting more and more exhausted. And it's just not a healthy relationship to work. Work-work balance is a way of saying, I'm going to start making some choices. I'm going to decide of this work what's most important and is going to get my focused attention. And what of this work maybe falls into a different category. Maybe it can wait. Maybe it can be done, but perhaps at a lower level. Not everything has to be perfect, right? Some things can be just good enough. That's all that we need to do. And some things don't need to be done.
Sure.
I think one of the things we struggle with is making those decisions, communicating that we've made those decisions, kind of owning it, and feeling empowered to make those decisions.
That I love so much of that. And I know when I struggle and I have, as you said, the 10 things that you're trying to balance that all feel like they have importance to someone, I don't feel like I do any of them at the level that I need to do them, and then I carry that guilt almost with me sometimes. And I think that can be I don't know if a struggle is the right word, but it impacts your perceptions of your quality of work and quality of work life and feelings really towards the place you're at, I think, a little bit as well. And so I appreciate you saying that and it's okay to prioritize, or I'm not getting the words right, but
I think prioritization is critical, or intentional. To be intentional in your work and say, at this point in time, this is the work that seems most important, both for me, but also for others who may be depending on me, or students or colleagues who need me to get that work done so they can do their own work. But other work, either you could say, well, okay, it would probably be good if I got this done,
right.
But nothing's really going to be damaged, or no one is going to be able to, or not be able to do their work if I don't get this done right now.
So the question that I follow up with is putting that into practice, and how, because I think the ideas is great, but the challenge becomes you still have that list of 10 things in front of you, and you need to decide where are you going to prioritize. And so what are some ways that an employee at SDSU could strive to have that work-work balance and navigate the things that we're talking about?
So I actually think there's sort of 3 steps or 3 stages. One is the individual, right, where you have to advocate for yourself, make the decisions for yourself, and say, I am prioritizing this work. Or I have decided, if you're a faculty member, that my service responsibilities will focus on, say, student success, because that's what I'm really interested in, but I'm going to decline other opportunities to serve because they aren't in my specific area of focus right now. So that's one piece. You own it for yourself, you make your decisions, and you communicate those to your supervisor, to your colleagues, so they understand why you might say no to something.
Sure.
And that's hard. Sometimes I joke that I have to sort of sit on my hands and prevent myself from raising my hand.
Right.
Like, ooh, I'll do that, because you get in a habit. And a lot of us, we like to please others, right? So I want to help out. I want to do good.
Right.
But you can really damage yourself that way, and you cannot do your best work.
Sure.
The next piece, I think, is actually sort of interpersonal, and it's to your supervisor or to your colleagues, really being willing, being brave to go in and say, you know, I am really overwhelmed right now. I've got these 10 different projects. They've all got these deadlines. I don't know which deadlines are critical and which deadlines have some flexibility. Can you help me figure that out so we can prioritize and make sure that the essential work gets done?
I love that.
But so I can breathe.
Right.
Right? The last piece is more cultural, and that would be sort of the whole organization or institution. You know, having a conversation about its work-work balance, not just work-life balance. Because work-life balance kind of puts all the pressure on the employee. You got to figure out how to balance your work and your home life.
Right.
Work-work balance, the institution has a responsibility as well to say, all right, are we using our human resources, which are our key, most valuable resources, in the best way possible? Or are we sometimes, even for good reasons, sort of overspending? And one example I have is there's a tendency at universities, if there's a committee, you have to have one representative from everything. One from each college, one from each division, one from whatever your denominator is.
Sure.
And that often leads to very large committees and a lot of people on a committee whose time is being used who may not be interested or engaged or may not feel valued. It's not a good use of their time. To me, that's actually a signal to say, all right, why is the committee that large? And if the answer is, well, everybody's got to be represented because if everyone doesn't have a voice there, people won't trust what's going on. A different problem has been identified, which is about trust.
Right.
And that's the problem that needs to be solved so that a smaller, perhaps representative body, but not one from each, can be focused on the problem, focused on the task, and others can focus their attention elsewhere. Right. So I think we do, in the name of comprehensiveness, sometimes spend our time unwisely.
Sure.
And that leads to that imbalance.
I love that perspective. There's a lot to think about there.
Isn't there?
There really is. And I'm not going to go down that road right now, but I think the next level of the question that I'd be very curious to get your perspective on is, we talked about the employee having 10 items in front of them, 10 tasks, and those tasks being important to someone. And the employee now navigating that and figuring out, okay, I'm going to focus on these things. But those are still tasks that are important to someone. And so how can that someone, and in this case, I'm going to say campus leadership, how can campus leadership model work-work balance and advocate and promote and believe in that work-work balance idea and give those tools or that ability to their employees to advocate and also carry out that work-work balance philosophy?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the trickiest part, but also the essential part. Because, you know, we often think if you're a supervisor, you're evaluating the quality of someone's work, but we perhaps don't think about volume or complexity as much as we should. And I think one piece is simply to check in. You know, if you're a leader, be checking in with your team. Are people looking tired? Are people looking stressed? Is everybody getting things in right under the wire? That probably means they got too many things going on, right? That's one piece. I think modeling, you know, sometimes the best meeting is a canceled meeting.
Yeah.
You know, do we really, really need to have this meeting, or could it be a memo?
Right.
Could we share this information in different ways? And I think making sure that every meeting has a purpose, making sure that every meeting, if you've brought together a large group of people and you never let them share their ideas, why did you bring them together? As opposed to record something or write a memo and send it out, because their time is valuable and their expertise is valuable. I think the other piece, though, is, again, it kind of goes back to trust, right? The supervisor trusting that folks can sort their work into the most valuable work and share that prioritization with their supervisor, and their supervisor being willing to then perhaps advocate on their behalf if there's an external deadline or external pressure. I think for me, one of the places where I really learned about this, I was leading our student success team at my former employer, and boy, you know, advisors are always dealing with this issue. They've got so many time pressures, so many tasks, and it's got to be done in this short period of time. And there's just not enough, right? And the emotional labor is very high. And I had folks pulling way, way too long hours. And I finally said, look, at the end of the day, go home and be done with work, right? The work will sort itself, focus on the priorities, and if there's certain work that just doesn't get done, what that means is there's more work than your job can consume. And we're going to have to live with that. It's going to have to be okay that some of this can't be completed.
I like that a lot. That's a lot to think about there, too, as far as how that impacts our decisions campus leaders have the opportunity to make. I was going to ask this on a bigger scale, and I maybe still am, but I'm also very curious to get your personal experience living work-work balance here at SDSU. And so the question I was going to ask was really, what are some ways that the institution or individual units can prioritize work-work balance? But I'm maybe more curious about ways that within the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, you've been able to prioritize work-work balance with your employees.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's hard because it's every day you either succeed or fail at it. I think for me, one of the things I've tried to do is be very open about deadlines and prioritization of deadlines. Is this something, this ask, this paper, this set of data that we've been asked to give, is it sort of critical to the functioning of the college? Is it essential that academic affairs receives it? Or is this somebody just wants it for the annual report and is maybe kind of lower priority? So which is it? How critical is it? How I've really tried to work with how fuzzy is the deadline. So annual reviews are a good example. It takes us about 6 months to do faculty annual reviews, which is maybe a little out of control. But there's a deadline that's written into when they must be into the dean. And then there's the deadline for when the dean really has to get them in. And there's, 6-8 weeks in between those two. And so one of the things I've done is for folks I know who are really struggling, I just say, okay, I know you're working hard to get these in, but you're kind of overwhelmed. I got 7 schools. You can be number 7.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I'll start with the ones who had an easier time getting it in. You prioritize the work, get it done, but don't feel so much pressure. I think at the higher level, I think part of it too is, can we have conversations about these kind of things, right? Like what it means to really thrive in your work.
Right.
As opposed to survive in your work.
Right.
And I think a lot of people sort of survive in their work. They're overwhelmed by their email, they're overwhelmed by meetings, and then they've got these tasks on top of them. Is email that important, right? Yeah, you have to send it. Do you need a response?
Sure.
Can you back away from the keyboard? I mean, that's a place to start.
Right. No, I agree with that completely. Like, I'm thinking about being gone for about 4 days coming up here, and it's that day you come back and this need to dig in and go through that email, and it'll take hours, more than that, to get through. And there's a lot there. So we're getting near the end of our time. I wanted to ask one final question, and that really is about your perspective and advice that you might offer. And so, as it's no secret that you are going to be retiring from South Dakota State University, I think you're in the perfect place to provide some really honest advice for employees as they look and strive for work-work balance. And so, really, that's my question: is what advice would you give to employees at South Dakota State as they navigate their day-to-day as a part of this organization, and as we try to promote the idea of living a life of work-work balance here within the institution?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the advice I would give is to spend a little time just kind of sitting quietly, maybe with a piece of paper, and saying, what are the things that are most important to me about the work that I'm doing? What do I really want to accomplish? And that might not be on a week. That might be over a year or several years. And then what of my daily work actually goes toward that?
Sure.
Is it, I'm really routine and it has nothing to do with that, or is in fact this sort of crucial work? And then make sure that I'm prioritizing at least a little every day work time that goes to my bigger goals. And I think that can be really, really powerful, because it's very easy to go home at the end of a day and you've spent the whole day chasing your tail, going from meeting to meeting, email to email, and you really don't feel like you got anything done. You've just sort of been reacting. That's really disheartening. That can really, really drag a person down. Whereas if you've carved out even a little bit of time that's sort of more for your 30,000 foot or your strategic thinking, or, hey, I want to bring this to the attention of my supervisor, I think that's really powerful. I think the other piece would be to really think about your values, right? What are your workplace values? And, how do you want to be in the workplace? And I really got to give a shout out to my assistant, Katie Falcon, because she models this all the time. How she wants to interact with other offices, other individuals. And that is her superpower, but it's also the most important part of her job, is that she is a really impressive sort of advocate for and representative of the college, because she leads with her values.
Sure. I love that idea, leading with values. And what are the big goals? And as you said that, I thought to myself, when I'm able to actually make progress on the big goals and I leave work at the end of the day, I leave with a sense of having accomplished something, and I feel good about being a part of this place. But when you're chasing your tail and you don't feel like you get to the end of the day, you look up, it's 5:30, and you're like, I just didn't, I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. you leave and I don't know if you're discouraged, but you just don't feel as up and have that natural high as you leave the office.
And I would say is what you end up feeling is like a lack of purpose.
Yeah.
And, you know, work should give you purpose. You should feel a sense of purpose and meaning and that you're contributing. And if that's not there because you're overwhelmed or you're chasing your tail, something's out of balance.
Sure. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your perspective. I thank you for your impact and your service to South Dakota State University, and just for allowing us to have this conversation about work-work balance. I think there's a lot to think about within this and how it can impact both us personally, but also impact the institution if we embrace this concept, embrace this idea. And so I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Lynn, thank you again for your time and your work. And once again, thank you for joining us in this week's episode of the State of Wellbeing podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. This podcast is brought to you by the Mental Wellbeing Team and SD State Health.